There is a small piece of plastic in the pocket of almost every gorilla in the jungle. It is thin, shiny, and fits perfectly in a wallet. It has a logo on the front, a magnetic strip on the back, and a credit limit that feels like a gift the first time you use it. Most gorillas get their first credit card when they are young, excited, and completely unprepared for what it actually costs them. The card feels like free bananas. It is not free bananas. It is future bananas borrowed at an interest rate that the issuing bank hopes you never fully understand. This video is about the credit card banana trap, how it works, why it catches even intelligent gorillas, what it costs over a lifetime, and most importantly, how to use a credit card in a way that makes it work for you instead of against you. Let us begin with the basic mechanics that most gorillas never stop to examine carefully. When Bongo swipes his credit card at the vine market to buy something that costs 200 bananas, he does not immediately spend 200 bananas. He spends a promise. He promises the credit card company that he will pay them 200 bananas later. The credit card company pays the vine market on his behalf right now. Bongo walks away with his purchase and a debt of 200 bananas. If Bongo pays that 200 bananas back in full when his monthly statement arrives, nothing bad happens. The credit card company earns nothing from him this month. He gets the convenience of not carrying bananas everywhere, and if his card has rewards, he might even earn a few banana points toward future purchases. This is the ideal use case, and it is exactly how about 30% of credit card holders actually use their cards. The other 70% carry a balance. They pay the minimum payment each month, or something close to it, and leave the rest to accumulate interest. This is where the trap begins to close. The gorilla named Suze Orman wrote extensively about this in her book, The Money Book for the Young, Fabulous, and Broke, and described credit card interest as one of the most destructive financial forces in the lives of ordinary gorillas. Suze pointed out that the average credit card interest rate across the jungle hovers around 20% per year. Some cards charge 24%. Some charge 29%. A few predatory cards aimed at gorillas with poor credit histories charge rates above 30% per year. These are not small numbers. 20% annual interest is a devastating financial burden that silently consumes an enormous portion of your monthly income if you carry a balance month after month. At 20% annual interest, what does Bongo's 200 banana debt actually cost him if he only makes minimum payments? The minimum payment on most credit cards is approximately 2% of the outstanding balance, or a small flat amount, whichever is higher. On a 200 banana debt at 2%, Bongo's minimum payment is 4 bananas. He pays 4 bananas this month. The remaining 196 bananas begin accumulating interest at 20% per year, which works out to roughly 1.67% per month. That means next month, Bongo owes 196 bananas plus 3.27 bananas in interest, totaling 199.27 bananas. He pays 4 bananas again. The balance drops by less than 1 banana in real terms. At this pace, it takes Bongo over 7 years to pay off his original 200 banana purchase. And the total he pays is not 200 bananas. It is closer to 350 bananas. A 200 banana purchase costs him 350 bananas because of interest and minimum payments alone. He paid 150 extra bananas for the privilege of waiting 7 years to own something he bought in a moment at the vine market. Now scale this up to what most gorillas actually carry on their credit cards. The average credit card debt per gorilla household in the jungle is somewhere between 5,000 and 8,000 bananas, depending on the region. At 7,000 bananas with a 20% interest rate and minimum payments only, the payoff timeline stretches past 20 years. The total cost of that 7,000 banana debt paid off at minimum becomes closer to 20,000 bananas or more. The gorilla pays for the same original purchases nearly 3 times over. This is not a fringe scenario. This is the financial reality that millions of gorillas are living inside right now without fully realizing it. The gorilla named Dave Ramsey built his entire financial philosophy around this reality and described it in his book, The Total Money Makeover. Dave called credit card debt the most insidious kind of debt in the jungle because it is invisible in the moment of spending. The pain of paying is separated from the pleasure of buying by weeks or months. When you swipe the card, your brain registers a purchase and a small hit of satisfaction. The pain of the bill arrives later, and even then it is softened by the minimum payment option that makes the debt feel manageable even when it is slowly consuming your financial future. Dave spent decades working with gorillas buried under credit card debt, and the pattern was always the same. Small purchases made casually over months and years became crushing obligations that took years to escape. Dave documented case after case of gorillas in his book who were earning solid incomes, but felt perpetually behind financially. When they sat down and added up their credit card balances and the interest they were paying each year, the numbers were devastating. One gorilla was paying 400 bananas per month in minimum payments across 6 different cards. Over 12 months, that was 4,800 bananas going directly to interest and minimum payments, barely reducing the actual principal. 4,800 bananas per year, consumed silently, while the gorilla wondered why they could never seem to get ahead, no matter how hard they worked. This is what the gorilla named Elizabeth Warren described in her research before she wrote, "All Your Worth Together with Amelia Warren Tyagi." Elizabeth found that middle-income gorillas were not going broke because of reckless spending on luxuries. They were going broke because a growing percentage of their monthly income was being consumed by fixed financial obligations, including credit card minimum payments, that left almost nothing available for savings or unexpected expenses. The trap is not usually one dramatic overspend. It is a series of small monthly charges that accumulate over years until the minimum payment landscape becomes overwhelming and the gorilla feels completely trapped. But here is where the psychology becomes even more dangerous. Credit cards are not designed neutrally. They are engineered by very sophisticated teams of gorillas whose entire job is to maximize the amount of interest cardholders pay. The gorilla named Dan Ariely, who wrote Predictably Irrational, spent years studying how gorillas make financial decisions and found that paying with a credit card consistently causes gorillas to spend more than paying with physical bananas. When you hand over real bananas, you feel the loss. The brain registers the reduction in your pile. When you swipe a card, there is no immediate physical sensation of loss. The brain does not process the transaction as a real cost in the same way. Studies showed that gorillas were willing to bid significantly more for the same item at auction when paying by card compared to cash, sometimes nearly double. This is not a character flaw. It is a predictable neurological response to the removal of physical payment from the spending experience. This means that simply having a credit card in your wallet changes your spending behavior at a fundamental level, not because you are irresponsible, but because your brain is being systematically influenced by the design of the payment instrument. The credit card companies know this. They have studied it extensively. The entire business model depends on gorillas spending slightly more than they intended and carrying just enough balance forward each month to generate steady interest income for the bank. Credit card companies also use a technique called anchoring to influence minimum payments. When a statement shows a large balance and a small minimum payment, the minimum payment functions as an anchor for what feels like an appropriate amount to pay. Research shows that gorillas who see a minimum payment figure tend to pay amounts clustered around that figure, even when they could afford to pay significantly more. The card statement is deliberately designed to make the minimum feel normal. Paying the minimum feels like being responsible. And in the background, interest compounds every single month. There is another layer to this trap that the gorilla named Farnoosh Torabi described in her book, When She Makes More. Farnoosh observed that credit card culture specifically pushes gorillas toward lifestyle and social spending that creates emotional debt cycles. She described gorillas who used credit cards primarily for social activities, restaurants, travel, and entertainment, things they felt social pressure to participate in, even when the bananas were not there. The card made participation feel possible in the moment. The interest made it expensive, long after the dinner or the trip was a distant memory. This is one of the most painful aspects of credit card debt. You pay for experiences after they are already over. A vacation that cost 3,000 bananas and was paid off over 2 years with interest actually cost you closer to 4,000 bananas. But you only felt the joy of 3,000 bananas worth of experiences. The additional 1,000 bananas was pure cost with zero experience attached to it. You paid for a memory that already faded with bananas that could have been compounding in a high-yield account. The gorilla named Ramit Sethi in his book, I Will Teach You to Be Rich, takes a position that balances this reality carefully. Ramit argues that credit cards, used correctly, are actually one of the most powerful financial tools available to any gorilla. The key phrase is used correctly. Used correctly means paying the full balance every single month, without exception. Not almost the full balance. Not the minimum, plus a little extra. The full balance every month. If you can do this consistently, a good rewards credit card gives you cash back or points on spending you would have done anyway, provides purchase protection on expensive items, builds your credit score, which affects your ability to get good interest rates on mortgages and vehicle loans, and offers fraud protection that physical banana payments do not provide. The challenge is that most gorillas are not using credit cards correctly. They are using them as short-term loans at 20% interest, which is one of the worst possible forms of borrowing available in the financial jungle. Ramit's recommendation for gorillas who cannot consistently pay the full balance is the same as Dave Ramsey's in practice, even if the philosophy differs. Stop carrying the balance. Build the system first. The credit card becomes a tool only after the behavioral foundation is solid. The gorilla named Morgan Housel touched on this dynamic in The Psychology of Money when discussing the role of behavior versus knowledge in financial outcomes. Morgan pointed out that gorillas who know exactly how credit card interest works and can explain compound interest clearly are not immune to carrying balances. Behavior is shaped by emotions, habits, convenience, and social pressure, more than by abstract knowledge alone. A gorilla who completely understands that paying 20% interest is mathematically irrational will still sometimes put a large, unexpected expense on a credit card, because in the moment, it feels like the only available option, or because the minimum payment makes it seem manageable right now. This is why systems matter more than information. The automatic full payment eliminates the monthly decision entirely. The gorilla named Thomas Stanley, who studied genuinely wealthy gorillas for The Millionaire Next Door with William Danko, found something that surprised many readers. Most of the wealthiest gorillas in his study were not carrying credit card balances. In fact, many of them had simple plain credit cards with modest limits that they paid in full monthly. They were not using premium travel cards with high annual fees. They were not maximizing complex multi-tier rewards programs. They were simply treating the card as a payment convenience while keeping all their actual wealth in compounding savings and investment accounts. The real financial power, Stanley found, was never in how you pay for things at the Vine Market. It was in how consistently you saved and invested the gap between what you earned and what you spent. So here is the complete practical framework for every gorilla watching this video. If you currently carry a credit card balance, your first job is to stop adding to it. That means either physically cutting the card, locking it in an inconvenient place that makes impulsive use difficult, or making a firm rule that new charges only go on the card if you have the exact banana equivalent sitting in your account right now. At the same time, you direct every extra banana you can find toward the repayment. Dave Ramsey recommends the debt snowball method. Line up all your debts from smallest to largest, regardless of interest rate, and pay them off one by one, directing every extra banana at the smallest debt, first until it is eliminated, then rolling that entire payment into the next smallest debt. The psychological momentum of eliminating individual debts one at a time builds motivation that the mathematically optimal approach sometimes fails to sustain. The debt avalanche method is the mathematically superior alternative. You attack the highest interest debt first, regardless of balance size, which saves the most bananas in total interest paid. For a gorilla with strong discipline and motivation, this approach saves more. For a gorilla who needs visible wins to stay committed, the snowball often works better in practice. Morgan Housel would tell you to choose based on your behavioral reality, not on the math alone. If you do not currently carry a balance, the rules are simple and powerful. Pay the full balance every month. Automate this payment so it requires no monthly decision. Choose a card with rewards that genuinely match your spending patterns, without an annual fee that exceeds the reward's value. Treat the credit limit as completely irrelevant to your spending decisions. And if you are a younger gorilla just receiving your first card, the single most important habit you can establish right now is never spending on the card what you could not pay for with bananas today. The card is a convenience and a reward mechanism for gorillas who have the system to pay in full every month. It is not additional income. It is not a short-term loan. It is not a safety net for emergencies. Your emergency fund is your safety net. The credit card is a tool that earns you rewards only if it costs you nothing in interest. The difference between a gorilla who uses credit cards correctly and one who does not is not intelligence or income level. It is system design. One gorilla set up an automatic full payment once and never worries about credit card interest again. The other gorilla makes a manual decision every month about how much to pay, and that monthly decision is shaped by anchoring, emotion, and minimum payment psychology. The system wins every time over willpower. There is one final dimension of the credit card trap that deserves its own attention before we close, and it is the dimension that most financial books touch on, but rarely describe with enough specificity. It is the relationship between credit cards and the gorilla's sense of identity and self-worth. The credit card industry spends billions of bananas each year on marketing that links its products to status, achievement, and belonging. Premium cards are designed to signal success. They have heavy metal construction, exclusive airport lounge access, concierge services, and names that suggest elite membership. The marketing is not selling a payment tool. It is selling a version of yourself. You swipe the heavy metal card, and you feel like the kind of gorilla who has arrived. You feel like you belong in a different category from the gorillas using plain plastic. The gorilla named Juliet Shore studied this dynamic extensively in her book, The Overspent American, and found that competitive spending driven by social identity was one of the primary engines of consumer debt across all income levels. Gorillas were not spending recklessly because they lacked willpower. They were spending recklessly because the social landscape around them defined success through visible consumption. And credit cards made visible consumption available to everyone regardless of actual banana supply. This is the deepest layer of the trap. It is not just about interest rates and minimum payments. It is about the way credit cards enable gorillas to perform a financial identity that their actual banana situation cannot support. The gorilla who earns 2,000 bananas per month but spends 2,500 bananas per month using a credit card is not just going into debt mathematically. They are building a lifestyle and a social identity that is anchored to a financial reality that does not exist yet and may never exist if the debt keeps compounding in the background. Morgan Housel described this beautifully in The Psychology of Money with a simple observation about what wealth actually looks like. He wrote that wealth is what you do not see. The gorilla driving the expensive Vine Mobile and wearing the designer fur coat may be carrying 40,000 bananas of credit card debt. The gorilla driving a modest vehicle and wearing a plain suit may be quietly sitting on a 400,000 banana investment portfolio. We cannot see net worth. We can only see spending. And credit cards allow spending to be entirely decoupled from actual wealth. Every gorilla who wants to build real financial independence needs to make peace with one uncomfortable truth. You will sometimes have to spend less than your peers appear to be spending. You will sometimes drive the modest car, while others drive the impressive one. You will sometimes choose the home-cooked meal while others post photos from expensive restaurants. And some of those others will be carrying debts that you will never have to carry, paying interest for years on experiences that briefly looked like prosperity from the outside. The banana trap is not just in the interest rate. It is in the belief that the card represents an identity rather than a tool. Master that belief, build the system, and the credit card becomes genuinely useful. Ignore it, and the small piece of plastic in your pocket becomes one of the most expensive things you own. The books mentioned in this video are The Total Money Makeover by Dave Ramsey, I Will Teach You to Be Rich by Ramit Sethi, The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel, The Money Book for the Young Fabulous, and Broke by Suze Orman, Predictably Irrational by Dan Ariely, All Your Worth by Elizabeth Warren, and Amelia Warren Tiagi, When She Makes More by Farnoosh Torabi, The Millionaire Next Door by Thomas Stanley and William Danko, and The Overspent American by Juliet Shore. Every single one of these books is available in the Jungle Library, and every single one will permanently change how you think about the small plastic card sitting in your pocket.